The hymnal felt heavier tonight. Ezra Whitmore clutched the leather-bound book against his chest as he climbed the narrow stairs to the choir loft, each step creaking under his weight. Thursday nights were different at St. Mauro's Presbyterian Church. Thursday nights, they sang for the dead. "You're late," whispered Tobias from his spot in the front row. His red hair caught the candlelight as he turned, freckled face serious. Father Grimsby already read the names. Ezra slipped into his assigned position between Tobias and Caleb, trying not to look down at the congregation below. Rule 3 echoed in his mind. Don't look directly at the congregation during the death hymns. He'd learned that rule the hard way 2 months ago. "How many tonight?" Ezra asked, opening his hymnal to page 47. The death mass always started with eternal rest. 12, Caleb answered, his voice barely audible. Caleb had been in the St. Mauro's choir longer than anyone, even longer than Matthias, who sat in the back row and never spoke to the younger boys. All from the plague that hit Millbrook last winter. Ezra nodded. The plague had been terrible. Whole families wiped out in days. The regular Sunday services hadn't been enough for all the souls that needed guidance to the other side. That's why Father Grimsby had started the Thursday night masses. That's why they'd been given the rules. The 7 rules were simple, Father Grimsby had explained when Ezra first joined the death choir 6 months ago. Follow them exactly and you'll be safe. Break even 1 and you might not make it through the night. Rule 1, never sing alone after midnight. Rule 2, always face the altar when the bells toll. Rule 3, don't look directly at the congregation during the death hymns. Rule 4, keep your hymnal closed between songs. Rule 5, never respond if someone calls your name during the service. Rule 6, exit through the side door, never the main entrance. Rule 7, if the candles go out, stop singing immediately. Father Grimsby appeared at the pulpit below, his tall frame draped in black robes. His gray beard reached nearly to his waist, and his eyes held a weight that Ezra had never seen in other adults. The priest raised his arms, and the choir stood as one. "We gather tonight to guide the departed," Father Grimsby's voice carried through the stone church. "To sing them home with voices pure and true. Remember, boys, the dead can hear us. They depend on us. Do not let them down." The organ began to play, its deep notes vibrating through the floor and up into Ezra's bones. Mrs. Hartwell had been the organist at St. Mauro's for 30 years, and she played the death masses with a reverence that made the regular Sunday hymns sound like children's songs. "Eternal rest grant unto them, O Lord," the choir began in unison. Ezra's voice blended with the others, a clear soprano that had earned him his place in the front row. "And let perpetual light shine upon them." As they sang, Ezra kept his eyes fixed on the stained glass window behind the altar. The window depicted Christ welcoming souls into heaven, and during the death masses, it seemed to glow with its own light. The boys had been taught to focus on that window, to let it guide their voices and their purpose. The first hymn ended, and everyone closed their hymnals. Rule 4. Ezra had asked Father Grimsby why once, and the priest had simply said that some things needed to stay contained between uses. "Tonight we sing for the Morrison family," Father Grimsby announced. Thomas, age 42, his wife Margaret, aged 39, their children David, Emma, and little Sarah, ages 14, 11, and 6. A whole family. Ezra's stomach tightened. Family deaths were always harder. The congregation tonight would be heavy with grief. "Page 63, Tobias whispered, "in paradise." They opened their hymnals again. This hymn was slower, more mournful. It spoke of souls finding peace in the afterlife, of reunions beyond the veil of death. As Ezra sang, he thought about little Sarah Morrison, only 6 years old. What must it be like to die so young? What must it be like to need guidance to find your way to the other side? Halfway through the second verse, Ezra heard something. A voice that didn't belong to the choir, didn't belong to Father Grimsby, and certainly didn't belong to Mrs. Hartwell at the organ. It was calling his name. "Ezra," the voice whispered, seeming to come from directly below the choir loft. "Ezra, look at me!" Rule 5 crashed through his mind like a bell. Never respond if someone calls your name during the service. Ezra kept singing, his voice steady despite the chill that ran through him. The voice came again, more insistent this time. "Ezra, please, I need help." It sounded like a child. It sounded like a little girl. Ezra's voice wavered for just a moment before he caught himself. He gripped his hymnal tighter and focused on the stained glass window. Christ's outstretched arms seemed to be reaching toward him, offering comfort. The hymn ended, and they closed their hymnals again. Father Grimsby was announcing the next family, but Ezra could barely hear him over the sound of his own heartbeat. The voice had been so clear, so desperate. Everything in him wanted to look down, to see who needed help. But he'd been in the death choir long enough to know that not everything that spoke during the Thursday night masses was among the living. "The Blackwood family," Father Grimsby continued. "Jonathan, aged 51. His mother Eleanor, aged 78. His daughter Rebecca, aged 16. More names, more souls that needed guidance." Ezra opened his hymnal to the next marked page and began to sing again. This time it was "Guide Me Home," a hymn that spoke of light leading the way through darkness. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, and Mrs. Hartwell's organ work made it sound like angels singing. As they reached the chorus, the candles on the altar flickered. Ezra's voice caught in his throat. Rule 7. If the candles go out, stop singing immediately. But they hadn't gone out, not completely. They were just flickering, dancing in what must be a draft from somewhere in the old church. Beside him, Tobias continued singing without pause. Caleb, too. If they weren't worried, then Ezra shouldn't be either. He added his voice back to the choir, letting the familiar words carry him forward. The Thursday night masses lasted exactly 2 hours. Father Grimsby had explained that this was the amount of time needed for the souls to hear their names, follow the music, and find their way to the light. Any longer, and other things might start to listen. Any shorter, and some souls might be left behind. They sang for 7 families tonight. The Morrisons, the Blackwoods, the Ashfords, the Crowleys, the Palmers, the Stones, and the Grays. Each family got 3 hymns. Each hymn opened a path for the dead to follow. As they began the final hymn of the night, "Rest in Peace," Ezra noticed that the church felt different, lighter somehow, as if a great weight had been lifted from the air. This always happened at the end of the death masses. Father Grimsby said it meant their work was done, that the souls had found their way home. The last note faded into silence. Mrs. Hartwell's hands lifted from the organ keys. Father Grimsby bowed his head in prayer. "Go in peace," the priest said finally. "Your service tonight has been blessed." The choir closed their hymnals and began to file out through the side door. Rule 6. Never exit through the main entrance. Ezra had never asked why, but he'd heard whispers among the older boys that something waited near the main doors during the death masses, something that fed on the music they made. As Ezra reached the side door, Father Grimsby caught his arm. "A moment, please," the priest said quietly. Ezra waited as the other boys filed out. Tobias gave him a questioning look, but Ezra just shrugged. When they were alone, Father Grimsby led him to a small alcove near the side altar. "You heard something tonight," the priest said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir," Ezra admitted. "Someone called my name during the second hymn." Father Grimsby nodded gravely. "And you followed Rule 5. "Yes, sir. I didn't respond." "Good boy." The priest's weathered hand rested on Ezra's shoulder. "Tell me, what did the voice sound like?" Ezra thought carefully before answering. Like a little girl. She said she needed help. Father Grimsby was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was heavy with something Ezra couldn't identify. Sadness, maybe. Or fear. Ezra, there are things about our Thursday night services that you're still learning. The rules exist for a reason. They keep us safe from those who would use our music for purposes other than guiding souls to rest. What kind of purposes? Ezra asked. The kind that would trap souls instead of freeing them. The kind that would use the dead for their own ends. Father Grimsby's grip on Ezra's shoulder tightened slightly. You did well tonight. The voice you heard, it wasn't one of the souls we were helping. It was something else, something that wanted to trick you into breaking the rules. Ezra felt a chill run through him. What would have happened if I had looked? If you had looked, you would have seen something that would have made you want to help. And if you had tried to help, you would have become part of what we sing against instead of what we sing for. The priest's words hung in the air like incense smoke. Ezra nodded, understanding more than he wanted to. Father, why do we do this? Why not just let the regular Sunday services handle all the souls? Father Grimsby smiled sadly. Because some souls need more help than others. The plague that hit Millbrook wasn't natural, Ezra. It was called forth by someone who wanted to harvest souls for dark purposes. Our Thursday night masses help those souls escape that trap and find their true rest. Called forth? By who? Dr. Marvin Ravencroft. He used to be a member of our congregation many years ago. But he turned to forbidden knowledge, started experimenting with ways to bind souls to this world for his own use. The plague was his doing, and now he's trying to claim the souls of those who died from it. Ezra's mind raced. Is that what the voice was? Dr. Ravencroft? One of his servants. He sends them to try to trick choir members into breaking the rules. Once the rules are broken, the protective barrier around our service falls, and he can interfere with our work. The pieces were starting to fit together in Ezra's mind. The rules, the specific timing, the side door exit. All of it was designed to keep Dr. Ravencroft and his servants from disrupting their mission to help souls find peace. How long has this been going on? Ezra asked. 3 years, ever since the first outbreak in Millbrook. Dr. Ravencroft has been growing stronger, claiming more souls. We're one of the few things standing between him and complete success. Father Grimsby released Ezra's shoulder and walked to the small window that looked out over the cemetery behind the church. In the moonlight, the headstones looked like teeth rising from the earth. Ezra, I'm telling you this because you're ready to know the truth. You've proven tonight that you can follow the rules even when it's difficult. The other boys will learn in time, but you're different. You have a gift for this work. What kind of gift? You can hear them more clearly than the others. The souls, the servants, all of it. That's why the voice was able to reach you so directly tonight. It's also why you're so important to what we do here. Ezra looked out the window beside Father Grimsby. The cemetery was peaceful now, but he wondered what it looked like during their Thursday night services. Did the souls they helped actually walk among the headstones? Did Dr. Ravencroft's servants lurk there, waiting for their chance to interfere? Will it get harder? Ezra asked. Yes, Father Grimsby said honestly. Dr. Ravencroft knows about you now. He'll send stronger servants, more convincing voices. But as long as you remember the rules, as long as you stay strong, you'll be safe. They stood in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the moonlight play across the cemetery. Finally, Father Grimsby turned back to Ezra. Go home now. Get some rest. Next Thursday will bring new challenges, new souls to help. But tonight, you did well. Ezra nodded and headed for the side door. As he stepped out into the cool night air, he felt the weight of his new knowledge settling on his shoulders. The Thursday night masses weren't just about singing hymns and honoring the dead. They were about fighting a war for the souls of the departed. The walk home took 15 minutes through the quiet streets of Millbrook. Most of the town was asleep by now, but Ezra found himself looking at every shadow differently. Were there servants of Dr. Ravencroft hiding in them? Were there lost souls wandering the streets, unable to find their way to the light? When he reached his house, a small cottage on Elm Street, Ezra paused at the front gate. His mother would be asleep by now, and his father wouldn't be home from his merchant trip until next week. The house felt lonely in the darkness, but it also felt safe. Whatever protection the rules provided seemed to extend beyond the church walls. As Ezra climbed the stairs to his bedroom, he thought about the voice that had called his name. It had sounded so young, so afraid. Even knowing it was one of Dr. Ravencroft's servants, part of him still wanted to help. That was what made it so effective as a trap. He changed into his nightclothes and knelt beside his bed for evening prayers. Tonight, he added an extra prayer for the souls they had helped find peace, and another for strength to resist whatever tricks Dr. Ravencroft might try next week. Outside his window, the church bell tower was visible in the distance. St. Mauro's stood like a guardian over the town, its stone walls holding back forces that most people never even knew existed. Ezra was proud to be part of that protection, even if it meant carrying the weight of secrets and following rules that sometimes felt cruel. As sleep began to take him, Ezra's last conscious thought was of the stained glass window behind the altar. Christ's outstretched arms had seemed so real tonight, so ready to welcome the souls they had guided home. Tomorrow was Friday, which meant he had 6 days before the next Thursday night Mass. 6 days to prepare for whatever Dr. Ravencroft would try next. The hymnal on his nightstand seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight, its leather cover worn smooth by countless hands. Inside those pages were the songs that could guide souls to peace, or, if misused, trap them in eternal servitude. Ezra was beginning to understand that being a choir boy at St. Mauro's Presbyterian Church was about much more than just having a good voice. It was about being a warrior in a war most people never knew was being fought. Friday morning brought rain to Millbrook. Ezra watched it streak down his bedroom window as he ate breakfast, thinking about Father Grimsby's words from the night before. The truth about Dr. Ravencroft and the Thursday night masses felt heavy in his chest, like swallowing a stone. His mother, Helen, bustled around the kitchen preparing for her day at the bakery. She hummed while she worked, a cheerful tune that sounded nothing like the hymns Ezra sang at church. He wondered what she would think if she knew what really happened during those Thursday night services. "You're quiet this morning," she said, placing a plate of eggs before him. "Everything all right at choir practice?" "Yes, ma'am," Ezra said, taking a bite. "Just tired." Helen smiled and ruffled his hair before heading out into the rain. Ezra finished his breakfast alone, then spent the day helping Mrs. Pemberton next door with her garden. The simple work of pulling weeds and watering plants helped calm his mind, but he couldn't shake the memory of that voice calling his name. Saturday and Sunday passed peacefully. The regular Sunday service felt almost ordinary after Thursday night's intensity. The congregation sang familiar hymns. Father Grimsby gave a sermon about kindness to neighbors, and Mrs. Hartwell played the organ with gentle reverence, instead of the deep, soul-stirring power she brought to the death masses. Monday brought news that made Ezra's blood turn to ice water. Mrs. Hartwell had fallen ill during the night. Dr. Peterson, the town physician, said it looked like the same plague that had swept through Millbrook the winter before. "But that's not possible," Tobias said when they gathered at the church Tuesday evening for regular choir practice. "The plague burned itself out months ago. There haven't been any new cases since spring." Father Grimsby's face was grim as he addressed the boys in the choir loft. "Mrs. Hartwell is very sick. Dr. Peterson is doing everything he can, but we must prepare for the possibility that she won't recover." "What does that mean for Thursday night?" asked Matthias from the back row. It was the first time Ezra had ever heard him speak during practice. "We'll proceed as planned," Father Grimsby said firmly. "The dead cannot wait for our convenience. If Mrs. Hartwell cannot play, I'll operate the organ myself. But Ezra knew it meant more than that. Mrs. Hartwell's illness wasn't coincidence. Dr. Ravencroft was making his move. Wednesday evening, Mrs. Hartwell died. Father Grimsby gathered the choir boys in the church sanctuary that night. Candles flickered on the altar, casting dancing light across the stone walls. The priest looked older than Ezra had ever seen him. Mrs. Hartwell's death was not natural, Father Grimsby said without preamble. Dr. Ravencroft killed her to weaken our defenses for tomorrow night's service. The words hung in the air like incense smoke. Caleb shifted nervously beside Ezra. Tobias stared at the altar with wide eyes. "But why Mrs. Hartwell?" asked Nathaniel, one of the younger boys. "She was just the organist." "She was never just the organist," Father Grimsby replied. "Mrs. Hartwell was the anchor that kept our music pure. Her playing created the foundation that allowed your voices to guide souls safely home. Without her, tomorrow night's service will be far more dangerous." "Then we should cancel it," Tobias said quickly. "Wait until we can find another organist." Father Grimsby shook his head. "There are 14 souls waiting for our help tomorrow night. If we delay, Dr. Ravencroft will claim them. I won't abandon them to that fate." Ezra raised his hand hesitantly. "Father, what makes tomorrow night different from other Thursday services?" The priest was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of terrible knowledge. "Tomorrow night is the anniversary of the first plague death in Millbrook. Dr. Ravencroft's power is strongest on anniversaries. He's been building toward this night for a full year, gathering strength, preparing his most powerful servants. Mrs. Hartwell's death was the final piece of his plan." "What does he want?" Caleb asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "All of them. Every soul that died from the plague. If he can claim them tomorrow night, he'll have enough power to extend his influence beyond Millbrook. Other towns, other cities. The plague will spread again, but this time it won't burn itself out. It will keep growing until Dr. Ravencroft has claimed every soul in the region." The magnitude of what Father Grimsby was describing settled over the boys like a burial shroud. They weren't just singing hymns. They were the last line of defense against something that could consume thousands of lives. "The rules will be more important than ever tomorrow night," Father Grimsby continued. "Dr. Ravencroft will send his strongest servants to try to break our protective barrier. They'll know exactly what to say, exactly how to tempt each of you. You must not listen. You must not look. You must not respond." "What if we can't do it?" Nathaniel asked, his young voice trembling. "What if someone makes a mistake?" Father Grimsby's expression softened slightly. "Then we pray that the rest of us are strong enough to maintain the barrier until the service ends. But I have faith in all of you. You've proven yourselves these past months. Tomorrow night, we'll prove ourselves again." They spent the rest of the evening practicing the hymns for Thursday's service. Without Mrs. Hartwell, Father Grimsby had to play the organ himself, and his style was different, more hesitant. The music sounded thin, incomplete. Ezra could only imagine how much harder it would be to maintain focus with such weak instrumental support. Thursday evening arrived gray and cold. Storm clouds gathered overhead as Ezra walked to St. Mauro's, and he could feel electricity in the air that had nothing to do with the weather. The church seemed different tonight, more solemn, as if the building itself understood the importance of what was about to happen. The other choir boys were already assembled when Ezra reached the loft. Tobias looked pale but determined. Caleb clutched his hymnal like a shield. Even Matthias seemed nervous, though he tried to hide it behind his usual stoic expression. "Remember the rules," Father Grimsby said as he took his place at the organ bench. "No matter what you hear, no matter what you see, follow the rules." The service began at 9 o'clock sharp. Father Grimsby's organ playing was competent, but lacked the power that Mrs. Hartwell had brought to the death masses. The music felt fragile, as if it might shatter at any moment. They began with "Eternal Rest," but even before they reached the first chorus, Ezra could tell something was different. The air in the church felt thick, oppressive. The candles on the altar flickered constantly, though there was no wind. "We sing tonight for those claimed by the plague," Father Grimsby announced, his voice carrying less authority than usual. "May they find the peace that was stolen from them." As they opened their hymnals for the second hymn, Ezra heard footsteps in the church below, heavy boots walking down the center aisle toward the altar. But when he glanced down, careful not to look directly at the congregation, he saw no one. The footsteps stopped directly below the choir loft. "Hello, boys," a voice called up to them. It was deep, cultured, with an accent Ezra couldn't place. "Such beautiful voices you have. Such a waste to use them for such pointless work." Father Grimsby's hands never stopped moving across the organ keys, but Ezra could see tension in the priest's shoulders. This was Dr. Ravencroft himself, not one of his servants. "Ezra," the voice called, and every boy in the choir tensed. "Yes, I know your name. I know all your names. Tobias, Caleb, Matthias, Nathaniel. Such good boys, trying so hard to help souls find peace. But what if I told you that you're actually trapping them? What if your songs aren't freeing the dead but binding them to eternal servitude?" Rule 5 echoed in Ezra's mind. Never respond if someone calls your name during the service. But Dr. Ravencroft's words were designed to create doubt, to make them question everything they'd been taught. "Look at me, boys," Dr. Ravencroft continued. "See the truth of what you're doing. See the souls you've condemned with your pretty songs." The temptation to look was overwhelming. Ezra gripped his hymnal tighter and focused on the stained glass window behind the altar. Christ's outstretched arms seemed dimmer tonight, less welcoming. Even the window was struggling against Dr. Ravencroft's influence. Beside him, Nathaniel whimpered softly. The youngest member of their choir was trembling, his hymnal shaking in his hands. Poor little Nathaniel. Dr. Ravencroft's voice was gentle now, almost fatherly. "You miss your grandmother, don't you? She died last spring. Would you like to see her again? I can arrange that. All you have to do is look at me." Nathaniel's head began to turn toward the congregation. Ezra reached out quickly and grabbed the younger boy's chin, forcing him to look back at the altar. "The window," Ezra whispered urgently. "Focus on the window." Dr. Ravencroft laughed, a sound like autumn leaves scraping across stone. "Clever boy, that Ezra. But you can't protect everyone, can you? There are 7 of you, and only 1 of him." The organ music grew weaker. Father Grimsby was struggling to maintain the protective barrier without Mrs. Hartwell's support. The candles on the altar flickered more violently, and one of them went out completely. "Rule 7, Caleb whispered desperately. "If the candles go out, stop singing immediately." But only 1 candle had died. The others still burned, though barely. Ezra made a decision that would have terrified him a week ago. "Keep singing," he said firmly. "1 candle isn't all of them." They continued the hymn, their voices thin but steady. Dr. Ravencroft's presence pressed against them like a physical weight, but they held firm. The first hymn ended, and they closed their hymnals. "Such dedication," Dr. Ravencroft mused. "But you're fighting a losing battle. Your priest is weak without his organist. Your protective barrier grows thinner with each note. Soon, I'll be able to do more than just talk." They opened their hymnals for the second hymn, "Guide Me Home." As they began to sing, Ezra heard something that made his voice catch. Mrs. Hartwell's organ, clear and strong, joining Father Grimsby's weaker playing. But Mrs. Hartwell was dead. "Do you hear that?" Dr. Ravencroft's voice carried a note of surprise. "How interesting. It seems the old woman's spirit is more stubborn than I anticipated." The organ music grew stronger, drowning out Dr. Ravencroft's words. Mrs. Hartwell's playing was different now, more powerful than it had ever been in life. The candles on the altar blazed brighter, and the stained glass window began to glow with its own inner light. "You cannot stop what has already begun," Dr. Ravencroft shouted over the music. "The souls are mine by right. I created the plague that claimed them. They belong to me." But his voice was fainter now, pushed back by the growing strength of their music. The boys sang louder, their voices blending perfectly with the twin organ melodies. Even Nathaniel had stopped trembling and was singing with clear determination. They moved through hymn after hymn, song after song. Each piece of music pushed Dr. Ravencroft further away, weakened his hold on the church. By the time they reached the final hymn, "Rest in peace," his voice was barely audible. "This isn't over," Dr. Ravencroft whispered, and even those words seemed to echo from a great distance. "There will be other nights, other opportunities." But Ezra knew he was wrong. As they sang the final verse of the final hymn, he could feel something breaking. Not their protective barrier, but Dr. Ravencroft's connection to the plague souls. The anniversary night that was supposed to give him ultimate power was instead destroying him. Mrs. Hartwell's spirit had turned his greatest advantage into his downfall. The last note faded into silence. The organ music stopped. The candles on the altar burned steady and bright, and the stained glass window glowed with warm, welcoming light. Father Grimsby stood slowly from the organ bench. His face was streaked with tears, but he was smiling. "It's finished," he said simply. "Dr. Ravencroft's hold on the plague souls is broken. They're free to find their rest." As if to confirm his words, a gentle wind moved through the church, though all the windows were closed. It carried with it the faint sound of voices, dozens of them, singing in harmony. The souls they had helped over the past months, finally able to express their gratitude before moving on to whatever waited beyond. The choir boys closed their hymnals for the last time. There would be no more Thursday night masses. The battle was over, and they had won. They filed out through the side door, following Rule 6 one final time. But as Ezra reached the exit, Father Grimsby caught his arm again. "Mrs. Hartwell asked me to give you this," the priest said, holding out a small wooden cross. "She carved it herself years ago. She wanted you to have it as a reminder of what you accomplished here." Ezra took the cross, feeling its smooth surface warm under his fingers. "When did she ask you to give this to me?" Father Grimsby smiled. "About 10 minutes ago while she was playing the organ." They walked out into the night air together. The storm clouds had cleared, and stars were visible overhead. The cemetery behind the church was peaceful now, truly peaceful. No restless souls wandered among the headstones. No servants of Dr. Ravencroft lurked in the darkness. "What happens now?" Ezra asked. "Now we return to regular services," Father Grimsby said. "Sunday morning hymns, wedding songs, Christmas carols, the kind of music that celebrates life instead of guiding death. Will you miss it? The Thursday night masses?" Father Grimsby considered the question carefully. "I'll miss the feeling of helping souls find peace, but I won't miss the burden of carrying such heavy secrets. You boys have carried that burden with remarkable grace." They stood in comfortable silence, looking up at the stars. Ezra thought about Mrs. Hartwell, about Dr. Ravencroft, about all the souls they had helped find their way home. The wooden cross in his hand felt like a promise, a reminder that even in the darkest times, music could be a force for good. "Father," Ezra said finally, "will we ever tell anyone about what really happened here?" "Someday, perhaps, when enough time has passed that it becomes a story instead of a secret. But for now, it's enough that we know the truth." Ezra nodded and began walking toward home. As he reached the gate of the church cemetery, he turned back for one last look at St. Mauro's. The stone building stood strong and peaceful against the starlit sky, no longer a fortress in a supernatural war, but simply a place of worship and community. The wooden cross felt warm in his pocket as he walked through the quiet streets of Millbrook. Tomorrow would bring a new kind of Thursday evening, one without death masses or protective rules. Just a normal night in a normal town where a boy could go home, do his homework, and sleep peacefully without worrying about trapped souls or malevolent doctors. But Ezra would never forget the lessons he had learned in the choir loft of St. Mauro's Presbyterian Church. He had learned that sometimes the most important battles were fought in silence, that music could be both a weapon and a shield, and that following the rules, even when they seemed harsh, could mean the difference between salvation and damnation. Most importantly, he had learned that he was braver than he had ever imagined, and that courage was often found not in grand gestures, but in the simple act of continuing to sing when everything in you wanted to stop. The hymnal on his nightstand would remain closed from now on, its pages no longer needed for guiding souls to their eternal rest. But the memory of the music, the power of voices raised in harmony for a righteous cause, would stay with him forever. As sleep took him that night, Ezra's last thought was of Mrs. Hartwell's spirit, still playing the organ in whatever realm awaited beyond death, her music finally free to be purely joyful instead of urgently protective. Somewhere in that thought, he found the perfect peace that had eluded him for months. The Thursday night masses were over. The souls were free. And Ezra Whitmore, choir boy of St. Mauro's Presbyterian Church, could finally rest.